Welcome to the Neijiaquan Podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, Qigong, and meditation. This week we continue our discussion on Bagua Grandmaster Yin Fu. We take from Yin Yuzhang's book. Yin Yuzhang is Yin Fu's son. So we take a look at his book, and from that we look at his description of Bagua Zhang as a general art. And then he breaks down the different practice methods by breaking it into the 8 trigrams. So we talk a bit about that and how that relates to the physical body. And then finally, he looks at how Bagua Zhang, in his opinion, connects to the I Ching and Taoism. And in our Patreon episode this week, we continue our discussion on spiraling energy bodies. So I put a short clip of that at the end of the episode so you can see what that's all about. I hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for your support. Thanks for listening, and take care of yourself.
Now we'd like to take a look at one of the books published in the Yin Fu tradition. This one is A Concise Book of Bagua Palming by Yin Yuzhang from 1932. And Yin Yuzhang is the son of Yin Fu, so it represents pretty direct connection to the teachings. It's written relatively late in 1932, which is a little later than Sun Ludong's books. This is maybe 15 years later. So our books about Bagua have been published at this point. So I wanted to fast forward to this little bit here. Yin Yuzhang says, Bagua palming works every part of the body with 8 kinds of techniques that are analogous to each name of the trigrams. It differs from other boxing arts in many ways. In particular, the 8 techniques entirely use palms rather than fists to strike. It exclusively uses the palm because the palm has a greater reach than the fist and adapts quicker. As for the method of practice, energy courses through the palm to create great power. So there's a few things in here. So he comes out straight up saying Bagua has 8 types of techniques that are based on the trigrams. That's pretty consistent with what Sun Ludong and Chang Qinghua said previously that we talked about, right? So it does speak to a fairly deep connection between Bagua, the martial art, and the Bagua philosophical concepts drawn from Taoism, although he doesn't really use those meditation and alchemy metaphors right here. But clearly there's some connection there that is true for Yin Fu as well as Chang Qinghua style. And then he says he uses only palms rather than fists. Now, obviously, there are some fist techniques, but it's true that Bagua is very palm-oriented. Why is that? He says you use energy in your palms to generate great power. What do you like about palms?
Simplest piece of it is you don't hurt yourself if you hit something hard.
Less chance of breaking your fist. It's true.
And so if you're doing it against somebody who's wearing a helmet or armor, right? If you hit it with your fist, it's going to hurt your hand. If you hit it with a palm, it's going to move that thing that you're hitting. So that's one piece of it. The other thing is the piece that he said about it adapting quicker, because
it adapts quicker.
Yeah. In one sense, even when you make a fist in Bagua, it doesn't stay a fist for very long. It generally opens back up and becomes a palm again. So it's this idea that a fist is just a palm that is coiled in before it coils back out again. And so I think that's the main piece about it, that it isn't as...
and I find that palm it seems to be more flexible. Like he says, it adapts quicker. Like when you're sparring, somehow using that palm shape allows me to twist my arm and make contact with different parts of my arm. And like, it makes your whole arm move as a whole differently than a fist, where you're kind of aiming a fist like you would fire a slingshot. You'd throw out, like a fist is like a rock. But whereas a palm, I don't know, it's more like it gives your arm more of a snake feeling to it. So you can whip it a little more. I don't know.
It also has more surfaces, right? So the idea that, a fist essentially has a forward, a down, and maybe a back to it, but it doesn't really have much on the sides. And
right.
So the idea
it sort of focuses your mind too. It kind of makes you use the fist as your thing, rather than letting you be more creative with the other parts of your arms. Because I noticed even with boxing gloves on, when I use Bagua techniques, even with boxing gloves on, it seems like I'm able to use my forearm and my wrist and my elbow and even shoulder more in contact with people. Like you're saying, there's more of that surface area somehow.
Yeah, I mean, and palm is I think referring to more than just the actual palm of your hand.
Right.
It's I think referring to a type of movement, which is, you know, where like a chuan is fist, right? Meaning that, you know, like when they say Tai Chi Chuan or Xing Yi Chuan, you're still using of palms and fists.
There's plenty of palm hits in there too.
But it's referring to a type of movement, I think, where Zhang, meaning palm, is referring to this sense of in a sense, kind of your whole arm.
Yeah, the Bagua people always say that, you know, the palm is the whole arm or the whole body. Right. Sometimes.
So it's yeah. I think more the idea that it's everything as opposed to, like you said, like a bullet shooting out of a cannon or something.
And the final thing he says, energy, obviously the word they're translating there is chi, courses through to the palm to generate great power. So there's again that there is always something in Bagua Zhang. There is some chi and energy and something about your awareness that's involved above and beyond just your strength.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those things. It's like you're saying that it's being done with energy, not force. And you know, some people will go into great detail about how to do that. Others will just say that that's what you're supposed to do. Just
do it. Either way, you got to do it.
Kind of figure it out on your own.
I like how it generates great power. It's not just for the sake of moving energy or whatever. No, it's generating great power. And if it didn't do that, you wouldn't bother.
Yeah, well,
there you go. The next paragraph says, while walking, Bagua travels around in a circle rather than along a straight path. If someone walks straight ahead for many miles, it may wear him out. But if he walks for a mere 5 or 6 minutes in a circle, he will surely become dizzy and mentally fatigued. For this reason alone, do not practice him properly. As the saying goes, what is habitual will become natural. Because Bagua palming possesses the skill of circle walking, whenever you encounter an opponent, you may whirl around him to find a gap and then seize the opportunity to attack. It is the same as in using an army. Relying only on frontal assaults will sometimes be effective, but can lead to terrible difficulties. Yeah, the enemy is sure to resist against it in one area, but will collapse in another and ultimately lose. So that's that sort of oblique angle effect that Bagua is always trying to get.
Right. I mean, it's exactly what he said. Sometimes you'll come in straight, but a lot of times that doesn't work. So you want to take an angle and come on the sides or from behind or somewhere like that.
And I don't think you necessarily have to whirl around 100%. There's just a sense that you're always trying to take an angle off to the side and set yourself up to hit their center from an angle they're not bracing against very well.
Yeah, I mean, and that also fits with if you're a little guy like Yin Fu, you don't want to be in one place for very long. You know, you want to keep moving and not be a target.
And what it says here is find a gap and then seize the opportunity. And gaps are something we've often trained about, whether mentally or physically. How can you find that instant split second where someone loses their attention and you can enter into their space and take advantage of that?
Yeah, there's physical gaps, there's mental gaps, you know, and I think that he's talking about both.
So he says here, furthermore, the posture while walking is comprehensively defensive. One palm is reached out at eyebrow level, able to defend the area between the head and the throat. The other palm is extended below the elbow of the front hand to guard your chest, and the palm can also guard your ribs, and the steps cover over your crotch to be able to guard your groin. Sun Tzu says, skilled warriors first put themselves into an invulnerable position and then wait for the enemy to reveal where he is vulnerable. So there's the concept. You use those hands to cover yourself and then wait for the opponent to break or screw up or trip up in some way.
Right. And I mean, that is the iconic posture of Bagua Zhang. It is that sort of single palm change posture where you're holding one hand in front of your face and one hand at your belly. And, you know, so that's exactly what he's describing there.
Yep. So that's another. So I think that points to definitely something that Dong Aichuan must have taught to everybody that he taught, was that guard posture, and everyone does it slightly differently, but everyone's got it.
I mean, the story I've heard is that that's what, you know, he learned from the Taoists in the monastery was some kind of circle walking practice. And so that,
right.
whatever it mixed with later on, that was clearly part of it. And I think on, like I said, for some people, it was just a physical activity to get you flexible and more grounded. For other people, it would become almost a, spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It seems like from day one, there's a lot of principles in common between everyone, but their reasons for practicing, even from the beginning, were different. There were people in the palace who were learning just for physical health or spiritual interest, and there were others outside the palace who were learning for bodyguard training so again, this book applies to all those people.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is most of the people that Deng Haichuan taught were there to learn how to do martial arts. And but he was teaching scholars and stuff and officials in the palace. Sure, they probably weren't hand to hand.
Well,
that's where I think that that line about he taught stuff that wasn't Bagua Zhang. What I think that means is he taught things that weren't martial arts.
They might have been circle walking, but they weren't necessarily for fighting purposes.
Right.
And that brings us to today. The controversy continues, where people are saying the circling has nothing to do with the meditation, and there's people saying that's the most important thing, and but it's been going on since day one. I'd posit that there's been multiple types of Bagua from the beginning.
That's all part of it. I mean, I don't think personally, I think it's a fool's game to try to say what it is. It's all of that. The whole thing of Bagua is it's a container for whatever you want it to be.
But I don't know if you can say the same. Like, there's a lot of martial arts that aren't that way. I think that's what the challenge is, because you were raised in this stuff. For a lot of us, learning maybe the Southern Shaolin that I learned or something like that. How that it didn't necessarily a container for whatever you want it to be. It's physical fitness and street fighting.
Right. Well, that's why
each one's made a unique, weird martial art that just got this edge to it.
That's the thing that makes Bagua weird, special,
interesting, and people can't help but get interested in it and argue about it.
I think that's the reason people are still interested in it, is it's not like other martial arts. It's not learn a bunch of techniques and a bunch of applications and get really good at them. It's got this other level that takes you to doing things that seem completely unnatural at first, but after a few years they start to become natural and they change you into something else. And that's this morphing of your body and your energy and all that they're always talking about.
Yeah,
I think he even says something in there about what is habitual will become natural, right?
What you practice is what you become,
right? And this idea that it first has to become a habit, then it will become natural,
ingrained somehow. It transforms you.
And that's kind of the what we've previously, the Jingqi Shen kind of development of going from sort of outside to inside to something else, emptiness, if you will. And I think that just gets said in a lot of different ways, but essentially that's what a lot of, this stuff boils down to, is you have to find that place first or along the way. And that then sort of transforms your art into this kind of higher level of stuff, which is a personal choice. You don't have to do that.
Right.
You could just keep it as a fighting martial art too. And that's what a lot of people did.
That's just fine. Yeah. And at that level, it kind of becomes your own thing. And that's another unique aspect of Bagua. Once you've eaten it and absorbed it into your system, you've got to manifest it your own way. And it's not going to look just like everyone else. No. Some people out there do it real weird that compared to how you do it, but it maybe is perfectly legit. It's just their personality becomes a part of it as well.
Yeah, and again, it sort of has that thing built into it about individual people have a different way of doing things, and Bagua kind of has a structure that you're trying to work around, but it also is okay with the idea of improvisation and doing things a little bit differently based on the situation. And I think that's the part about this sort of freedom of expression almost within it. Is it's not like you go completely off and make up your own thing, but there is some wiggle room in there for oh, I'm good at this particular type of movement already. For example, let's say you're really flexible, right? You're going to probably put more low stances and high kicks into your Bagua. If you're not, and you're more, let's say, internally like powerful, right, and really strong, you're not going to have a lot of high kicks and low stances, but you'll have a lot of things where you're doing sort of, Fa Jing, if you will, right? And so it just depends on what the person, I think, and people who then take what that person was doing, kind of, decide what it's going to be later on. But I just think trying to say Bagua is this is a mistake. It's kind of like saying jazz is this. You can't really do it because there's Kenny G and there's John Coltrane, and those two things that there's a world of difference.
It can both be jazz, so
they're both
you gotta
jazz.
Deal with that fact,
so,
hard as it is to swallow.
Yeah, so I think there's
So one last thing I wanted to pull from Yin Yuzhang's book here. It says, it was taught long ago that the human body matches the trigram. So here in Yin Fu style, they divide the 8 trigrams into different concepts and teachings within that relate to the body. So the first is heaven. Heaven connects 3 parts: palm, elbow, and shoulder. So the upper body is linked with heaven. Water fills within, energy sinking to the dantian. Whereas mountain covers like a bowl, the roundness of the skull like a bowl covering the head top. Thunder is an upright basin, meaning the human mouth, which is like a basin containing water. Wind cuts off below, meaning the legs, giving the sense that your steps are like you are walking on water fast as wind. Fire empties within. The hollowing of the chest makes the breathing smoother. Earth divides at 6 places: the shoulders, hips, and knees, demonstrating their interfunctionality. And finally, lake. Reduces above by way of straightening the neck. The significance of dui, that of straightness, also applies to the upper body. So he's taking these, some of these are energetic and some of these are physical. It's a strange mix. Like the first one, heaven, obviously you're linking the palm, elbow, and shoulder. So that's the upper body. But then water is sinking to the dantian. That's an energetic concept.
Right. Well, I think essentially what you have is they seem to be sort of paired up, right? You have a physical one, then you have a inner one, right? So you have the first one is about connecting your arm, your shoulder and elbow and wrist, palm, and that connection is kind of, that's your initial sort of arm got to connect to body so that when you do stuff, something happens. But then you have an internal thing of, even though your arm is out there, you have to be able to relax and sink it into your dantian. Because when they say elixir field, that's the dantian, right?
So that sort of gives you some oomph when that arm connects with somebody. You've got some basis there.
A physical structure of your arm is out and it's not going to collapse, and an internal sense of being sort of full and solid, right? Then the next one is talking about
the roundness of the skull. So like it's this cap over you.
Right. And that's what we would sometimes refer to as wrapping or ko, the sense of things kind of hooking or coming into the body, right? That there's like a slight roundness to everything you're doing. Again, these are sort of similar to like the 16-part Neigong. These would be kind of half physical, half energy, maybe not half, but
right.
Some portion physical, some portion energetic, because these are your guidelines for practice. And the thing that you're doing is both physical and energetic.
It's like you're manifesting all 8 trigrams within your body in different ways. Because mountain and thunder, mountain is a bowl, upside down bowl placed down, and then thunder is a bowl pointing up. So they clearly link together.
So they make that container, exactly. And
a basin containing water. So
I believe
a top and a bottom.
That Liu Tong Si Qua is part of that the sense of wrapping and sinking into the Qua.
So between them, there's a sense of unifying by bringing the rounded from above and rounded from below to kind of click together. But yeah, that's interesting. That's trippy stuff. We're talking about the skull there. And then wind. So that's pretty straightforward. Your steps are like you're walking on water fast as wind. So the wind idea is to let your legs be very free and swift.
Right. And wind is also where you sort of separate top and bottom. right? It's the, if you have heaven and earth, and then you have wind, is kind of what mixes those two. So that's the smooth, right? The smooth palm.
That's a smooth palm change, right? In the school, yeah.
But it's that piece about your steps are like walking on water, fast as wind. It's very much like this idea that you're not stuck in one place, right? And then the next one, talking about breathing fire, right? Empties within, and that's the whole piece about, I think, or some piece of the fire going up and coming, getting the microcosmic orbit thing, and how that opens up your chest,
and it refers to the breathing. So there's this space inside your chest where the breath can move.
The
freely.
Microcosmic orbit is generally linked to breathing in some way, right?
There's a connection there.
So the next one, Earth, is referring to the shoulders and the hips and the knees, and quote, demonstrating their interfunctionality. So saying that these three parts are always connected, right? That you're when you're walking, you're not disconnecting your shoulders from
the concept of six harmonies is one that often comes up in relation to those joints all sort of linking together without overstretching away from each other.
Yeah, I think this is just like a spin on that, if you will. And then the last one, I would say that last one is probably about taking the pressure off of your body, and so that the lifting of your neck takes the pressure off your spine.
That's a huge part of Bagua walking. If you're hunched over and crunched, that's going to mess everything up. You got to lift from above.
And because that also, it says, that lifting has to keep your upper body straight. Right? So it keeps your upper body straight rather than being slumped or whatever. So again, these are just fairly quick, I would say, like here's a quick list of things you can do when you practice. I don't think it's meant to be super deep. It's just to kind of give people a starting point for what do you think about when you practice.
Right. And he calls that out in the next paragraph, saying these were perhaps helpful hints that teachers would give to students for remembering things about the parts of the body. But since the art is called Bagua palming, an intimate relationship with the Book of Changes is inevitable.
There you go.
So he's calling out that sort of, it's connected to the I Ching on some level, but you kind of got to figure that out yourself.
Right. And I think, again, that points to this thing that it's not a necessary piece of it to do that. It's a optional piece, right? But there is a portion of it that is essentially unavoidable because that's what the whole thing is based on.
I mean, it's called Bagua, so you got to deal with it on some level.
You don't have to go super deep into it like some people do, but you do have to acknowledge that it exists, I think.
All right. Well, that's it for now.
Okay. Well, sounds good, man.
Good talking to you.
All right. Okay, folks. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Here's a short clip, like I said, from our upcoming Patreon episode on the spiraling energy body. There's a link in the description to our Patreon page to get access to the entire interview and much more. So thanks for listening and take care of yourself.
So bringing up the idea of how each of the different postures in spiraling energy body are somewhat individuated. The teacher, in a way, kind of prescribes each one to each student individually. So I wanted to make a point that we've talked about a lot. There's 5 Neigong sets. 3 of them are set up with exercises that everyone does the same. But 2 of the sets, spiraling energy body and bend the bow, shoot the arrow, contain hundreds of possible variations. And ideally, the teacher or the therapist prescribes an individual movement from spiraling to the person, and that helps them achieve the energetic goal they're trying to reach. So for people who are exploring those 5 sets, when you're doing spiraling or you're doing bend the bow, you're exploring, it's like a pharmacy. Each of them has not a million, but a lot of different possibilities for you to pick from, this apothecary of different postures and different energetic qualities that you can assign to them. Whereas the other sets, opening the energy gates, heaven and earth, gods in the clouds, those have a series of moves that are quite well documented, that everyone follows the same outward movements.
It's like a medication. You have sort of over-the-counter ones and you have prescription ones, right? So the over-the-counter ones are
Energy gates.
Energy gates, heaven and earth and gods.
Right. Okay.
And the prescription ones are spiraling and bend the bow. And quite honestly, if you don't have access to Bruce, I don't know how you're going to get the postures. I mean, I've been doing it for 30 years. I don't have the slightest clue how to do it. I mean, so
how to assign postures to someone.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't he always say he looks at all your 3 dantians or something? I've heard him say.
He does say that, but it's something. I mean, I know what it feels like to have him do it, so I can kind of relate to it on that end of it. But how you would do that to someone, I don't, like I said, have the foggiest notion how you would turn that into a posture. You would have to, you would have to do what he did, which is someone would have to show you this set of 3, this posture, this set of 3, this posture, right? And unless someone takes you through that, I just don't think it's possible. And that was part of the training that he did with the Yiguan Dao. Hey folks, Isaac here. Hope you enjoyed that. If you want to hear the entirety of the discussion on the spinal energy body, go to our Patreon page. There's that plus much more. Check out the Instagram for images to go along with the episodes. Like and subscribe and tell a friend. Take care of yourself.